Howard Kroeger, how are you doing?
Hey, good, Andy. How you doing?
I'm doing great. How was Aruba, by the way?
Aruba was excellent. It was what was interesting is that it started off relaxing, but with unfortunately the day we left, Toby Keith had passed away, and of
Yeah.
course, man, that was so sad, and it also makes our life, as radio guys, it makes our life very busy because we have to. I mean, it's only right that we respect
Yeah.
the core of our formats and so forth. And I'm a huge Toby Keith fan, so not only was I, devastated and bummed out, but was also as we were flying down, I was working with our producers, my son Travis and sons Travis and Lucas on crafting, these tributes to Toby. So. And then when I landed, we had about 6 hours of audio that we had to, because I'm the voice for our Hank stations as well,
Yeah.
and so I had to do that. But yeah, so anyway, but Aruba ended up being a good holiday. So
Well, and
thanks for asking.
I lived vicariously through you watching some of the Facebook posts as I'm here with the two kiddos, not leaving the house we've got a 6-month-old and a 2.5-year-old, so we don't leave for anything. Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, listen, Andy, I remember those days because my kids are all grown, and yeah, I look back on those days, and I wouldn't trade them for anything. They were.
Yeah.
I envy you. You have a lot of. Man, you got football, and you got
All ahead, yeah.
dance recital, and you got all that stuff coming up. So it's good.
We're calling this series a podcast Radio Influencers. So I was excited to talk to you because you and I have talked radio for years. We've talked
Absolutely.
music for years, and you always have some outside of the box, different ideas. Even though you're a guy that's been in it for a long time as well,
Yeah.
you still have a fresh look at things. Every time I talk to you, I come away with something. So I wanted to talk to you specifically today, kind of about creating formats that stand out, because you're certainly a guy that's done that. But before we get too far into that, I want to hear your radio origin story, how you got into this crazy business.
Oh, well, much like you, I was a professional musician, and
Oh, I wouldn't say I'm professional. I'm in the negative, so.
well, I was actually lead singer of a rock band. We were called Slipstream. This was in the early '80s. And what happened was there was only two things I really wanted to do, and that was A, be in a band, and B, be on the radio. Honest to goodness, those are the
Yeah.
only two things. When I was younger, I wanted to be a professional hockey player, but I knew that was never going to happen. So yeah, so that was it. And I moved out to a small town. I got a job at the radio station, and our band that I was playing in, we all happened to live out there. So it was the best of both worlds, and that was in the early '80s. And so got some announcing under my belt and working at a small market. And then got about 2 years of that, and then our band, we actually released a single, and we hit the road, and it was a great experience, but it was basically living on the bus and eating terrible food and
Yeah.
getting fired and hired and all that great stuff. Yeah, there came a time when we'd been on the road for one period. We were on the road for 9 months, and I had asked our guitar player, Howard Demke, who was also my roommate on the road. I asked him how much money we had made after 9 months, and we had a really a great stage set up. We had a great PA system. I mean, we had top of the line equipment back then. And I remember having the pre-gig nap, right? And so I said, "Hey, Howard, I'm going to have a nap. Just let me know what you come up with when I wake up." And I remember waking up with him standing over me going, "Howard, you've made $3,000 over the last 9 months." That was after, paying the sound guy, paying rental, bus, all food, all that stuff. And I figured, oh, man, this. I wasn't in it to take a vow of poverty, that's for sure. But anyway, so then I ended up when our band broke up in the early '80s. I got a job in Winnipeg at a station called Q94, and honestly, I've always been a bit of a homer. And
Yeah.
yeah, I just worked my way up through the ranks. Eventually, started off as the all-night jock, and then was swing jock, and then music director, APD, then eventually program director, eventually operations manager. And I know I'm cutting really, really quickly here, but
Sure.
things really, really changed for me back in 2000. The company I was with, Chum Broadcasting, which was like the company to work for. These guys were amazing. The Waters family was just a wonderful family. It was like being paid to go to university because they
Yeah.
believed in research. We worked very, very closely with the research group out of Seattle. They believed in creativity. They believed in. They allowed you to make mistakes, and which I made many. So we had bought this radio station called Magic 99 in I guess it was 2000 or whatever, and we didn't know what to do with it. And one day I went to a buddy's 40th birthday party in the country, and it was outside of a hockey arena. And my buddy Bert Siemens was turning 40 years old that night, and we as I got to the party, they had these huge speakers on this flatbed truck, and Bert had said to me, "Howard, I'm sorry, but we're not going to be playing," because I was programming Q94 at that time. It was a pretty successful hot AC station in Winnipeg.
Winnipeg. Yeah.
Yeah, and he says, "Yeah, we're not going to be playing your Wimpass hot AC station tonight. We're going to be rocking," and it was City FM, which ironically, I grew up listening to City FM. It was this amazing rock station, programmed by the legendary Steve Young, who I got to know. And but anyway, Bert said, "Yeah, we're going to be playing the music we grew up with tonight." And there's like 100 people out there. This huge bonfire going, and City FM is blasting through these speakers. And I said to him, "Hang on a sec, Bert." I said, "You said we're growing up with the music, or we're listening to the music we grew up with tonight." And he said, "Yeah." And I says, "Well, man, like, okay, Jimi Hendrix and the Doors, like great bands, but like we grew up with the Cars and Tom Petty and Meatloaf." And he says, "Yeah, you got a point." Anyway, as I've always experienced this in my life, being in radio, people always want to, talk music with you, right? And that's what that night turned into. I
Yeah.
kid you not. It was like this night of, 150 people sitting around a campfire talking about music. And after the night was over, I went home and I pulled out Joel Whitburn's, top pop singles, and I became musically aware very, 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 very early. I come from a very musical family, as you do,
Yeah.
and I was a Rolling Stones fan when I was like 7 years old. And because I heard my older cousin's version of or single of "Get Off My Cloud," and that just stuck with me. And anyway, I went to this book and I went through. I started at 1971 because I figured, yeah, I'm gonna use the year when I became what I consider musically, all in, which was 10 years old. And
Well,
I
which is
just
early. A lot of times that's 13, high school.
13, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I was a little bit weird that way. But yeah, so anyway, I put the book together, and a week or so later, we were sitting down with corporate at Chum, and I says, "Yeah, what do you guys think of this idea?" And because I always, like, I grew up, I've always considered myself too young to be a baby boomer and too old to be Generation X. I always felt like if you were born in, like between 1960 and 1965, I just always felt we were kind of
In betweeners.
in betweeners. So, and there wasn't any music being played at that time that really spoke to me, whether it be pop or rock. Anyway, make a long story short, we came up with this idea. And again, this would only have happened at Chum Broadcasting because they were so good at allowing us to come up with ideas and throw things out there, and never going, that's crappy, going, oh really, that's interesting, and dig into the idea. And so came up with this idea. We figured, okay, we're going to do a strategic study in the marketplace, and let's just see what the idea, how it shapes up. Well, we threw it out there into the field, and it came back, what we call the P1 index
Hmm.
for this was absolutely huge. Like the whole was like, I'm going, really? That's really, really cool. And we talked about, what do you want to call it? And I said, you know what? Rather than name it after some inanimate object like the bear or the rock or anything like that, let's just give it a name, give it a personality. And of course, there was Bob. I mean, Bob. Everybody knows Bob. Like everybody has a Bob. Everybody has
There's
knows.
Bob conventions.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, I let's call it Bob. And so that when the positioning happens on the air, it's like, Bob FM. Hey, Bob, you can have all sorts of cool things, all funny, great liners, and you can give the station a personality right out of the box. I mean, the station can be a personality without any personality if you want it to. Anyway, we agreed, and make a long story short, that's what we did. And unbeknownst to me, the actual results that we got back from the book were huge. Like we crushed it in every demo, right?
Yeah.
But unbeknownst to me, I mean, I was thinking this was something that was indicative to Winnipeg, but I got a call from when the ratings came out. I got a call from my friend who's since passed away, one of my closest friends, Pat Cardinal, who worked at CKLG in Vancouver. And he had said, man, you guys are kicking ass with Bob. Do you realize, like, Pat was always the guy who would always bring to my attention, do you know that you are, and I go, really? Like, I always had to have somebody tell me that, right? And he was one of those guys. And anyway, he said,
It's just good to have that friend.
it really is. I miss him dearly, too. But anyway, he had said that, man, you know what? We got to do something like that here in Vancouver. And I said, yeah, good luck, man. You're never going to, he worked for, that was Rogers Communications back then. And I says, yeah, well, you're not going to get Bob. And he said, yeah, we're going to have to figure something else. Anyway, he came up with Jack, right? That's how that started. And of course, success, repeated itself a year later. And that's kind of how the thing was a huge success in Canada before before it morphed into spread into the U.S. But yeah, that's how the whole thing started. And so anyway, in 2006, I decided to leave Chum Broadcast. We actually, ironically, we were being sold, and I figured, man, I really want to try this in the U.S. because I know that this could be big. And I didn't, because of the sale going through, I guess the station being sold or whatever, I actually even offered at one point, I says, listen, let me take Bob FM and let me franchise it in the States, and all the stuff that, all the money we're gonna make, we can channel it here locally. And there wasn't really a huge appetite for that, so I decided, well, okay, I'm gonna try it my own. So I did, and so it's been, Bob's been feeding my family since, for like 22 years. And
How has Bob evolved over the years?
That's a good question, Andy. This is what surprises me every year. And this is proof that you do things consistently and your product will continue to grow and evolve. So basically what's happened is that I really haven't done a whole lot different other than just make sure I'm playing the right songs in this format, right? Like, you have to be all in. It's got to be 50% female, 50% male. If you lean too far either way, you really become either a neutered rock station, or you become an AC station that has too much testosterone. So you really gotta keep it down the middle. And the other thing that's really important is the writing. right? I mean, the you got to keep the creative, and that's
Yeah,
never. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I've actually told people not to try to emulate what you do before when I'm working with clients because it's a lot harder than they think it is
Yeah.
to do what you do, and so a lot of the times when people try to emulate it, they can do it for like a month, but consistent the way you guys consistently crank that out is just incredible.
Yeah, well, and that is a very good point, and that's one of the reasons. The first thing, think about it, as program directors, what's the first thing we do when we get a station? We get all excited about, we get the
Yeah,
playlist we get the library ready, and then we write these great liners, and we get a new voice. And then 2 months in, it's kind of like, oh yeah, I guess I got to get new liners on the air. Oh yeah, I got. So that is a very, very important part of what we do. And yeah, keeping the I am very fortunate. I work with a great writer, a fellow named George McRobb, and a combination of what he cranks out and what we're able to crank out here. And Sean Caldwell, he's been the voice of Bob, the official voice of Bob, I call for since we started.
right.
And yeah, so as far as what have we changed and how we have evolved, just keep the same things going. Is make sure the creative is great. Make sure the stuff that you put on the record or that you're putting on the air and in between the records is fresh, right? And you don't have to go for the big belly laugh. I mean, just keep them smiling, right? Keep them smiling and play the right songs. And that's basically what we've done. And even the playlist itself, I mean, it changes, but over time, what happens is that you realize that okay, well, these power records, we know that they're going to be. We know AC/DC, You Shook Me All Night Long. It's been in power for the last 4 months. We know it's going to be in this next music test. It's going to go into secondary, and something else is going to take its
Right.
place. So it's just being consistent in those things. And I think that today it's even more important because the only thing that separates the streaming services, for example, like Spotify or Apple Music and us is how we present it and how we package it and what we put on between the music. I mean,
Yeah, and how it's
that's it.
curated,
Yeah, absolutely.
I
Yeah.
mean, I think is a big difference. The
Yeah.
when you started playing '90s tunes, was it hard to choose the ones that you felt like fit on Bob?
Um, we played. That was interesting because we did play '90s tunes at the very outset.
Oh, you did.
Yeah, and like the playlist. First of all, the playlist would be 50% rock, 50%, 25% pop, and 25% AC. And when I say pop and AC, it's usually stuff that pop stuff that either crossed over to AC or AC that crossed over to pop. It had to kind of be both. And as far as the '90s tunes goes, there's been yeah, that the '90s stuff, the '90s library that we play now, that was pretty much the '90s library that we you know that we
Played then.
that we played then. I mean, obviously there have been a few titles that have grown. It's the interesting thing has been the 2000s because one of the things that we always said on Bob was that listen, the idea of this format is you want to be personable. You want to be funny. You want to be safe, but you don't want to be bland. And you also want to make sure that the listener, if it's mom and dad or whatever, you want to make sure that they're kind of plugged into what's going because they still want to know what's the hey kids, what's the hip artists today? I mean, they still want to know that,
Yeah.
right? So that was a reason where the 2000s were populated by the artists of the day. Like, I mean, today it would be, Taylor Swift and Ed Sheeran, but, and then when we started, it would have been, Nickelback, who, by the way, I still love. Great band. Um,
Yeah.
and those types of bands. There was a group, there was a whole subset of artists like Nickelback and Default, Theory of a Dead Man. I mean, those are great bands that actually, like there was this 2000s rock thing that was coming out when we launched Bob, and because we launched, the first one was launched in the very first Bob was March 4th of 2001, I guess. And so, anyways, the 2000s has always been a very important, but we've never, you know, we really don't. I mean, we're not going to break records. We're only going to
Sure.
reflect the big ones, right? So, anyway, does that answer your question?
Yeah, yeah.
So
No,
that's
I just find that sometimes I find the '90s a little complicated depending on. I mean, I've got some obviously some classic hits, and classic hits vary drastically depending on the market, which is why programmers like it because they can tailor it to fit. But anytime the '90s come up, it always seems to be a struggle to get people on the same page on which ones
yeah. Yeah,
to
well,
to air
actually,
and which ones to pass on.
I think with Bob, you have a little bit of, I mean, you've got a little more leeway because I mean, there's some really cool, cool pop stuff that Bob plays that, I mean, like the OMCs. Um,
Yeah, well, it's kind of baked in that it's part of the format that you're going to sometimes have left turns. You
well,
know,
exactly too. And the other thing too is that a lot of the '90s stuff, you would, yeah, Red Hot Chili Peppers, Green Day, Pearl Jam, Sheryl Crow,
yeah,
Def Leppard, big one. So, Alanis Morissette, Third Eye Blind, those types of bands really make up a big part of the '90s sound on the format. So,
yeah. So we talked. You mentioned a little bit about the imaging that you do on Bob. That's part of what makes Hank so unique as well. I mean, you take that same kind of approach to Hank, making that the personality, right?
yeah, yes, same idea. I mean, there's a lot of pages from the playbook that I use on Hank. We took from Bob, but it's making an engaging, fun personality. And I think the thing is that when you're trying to develop a personality for a radio station, not the on-air jocks, but I'm talking about the overall image of the radio station. If you can make it, if it can be, the minute you hear people repeating lines that the radio station, will, on Hank, it's crank it to Hank, or Bob, turn your knob to
Sure.
Bob. I call them Bobisms or Hankisms. The minute you hear people say those, you know that you have made an impact of some way. Because in radio, especially in the diary markets, it's all about top of mind recall, right? And what's the best way to get remembered? Well, the best way to get remembered is, hammer your name out, and
Yeah.
people seem to remember it. So yeah, so same playbook for Hank. Our Hank clients, our Hank affiliates, every month we feed them. We write, we produce, we voice new stuff, and take away the old. So it's always keeping it fresh.
What's your take on Beyonce, Texas Hold'em, and country stations playing it or not playing it?
Yeah, what's my take? Does Jay-Z and Beyonce, do they have to own everything? Like, I mean, really? Um, but yeah, good for them. I mean, it is a different world today, right? I mean, even the music, it's funny because even the music that we play on Bob or even Hank, I mean, you have people discovering, on Hank, for example, you got people discovering, Reba McEntire, or no, I'll even go back further. You got people discovering Tammy Wynette alongside Lainey Wilson, right? I mean,
Right.
it's just the way the world is right now. And really, if you go back to one of the reasons why Bob was so, adult hits or variety hits is such a successful format is because it really was about playing anything. And one of the things that altered the way we listen to music is we took it out of its silo, right? And whereas everything was cut or sliced and diced into narrow silos, well, what happened is that variety became a niche again. So Napster was the reason for that, right? I mean, when Bob exploded, it was coincided right at the time of Napster and people making their own mixtapes, and all of a sudden it was cool to have ABBA next to, Ozzy Osbourne, right?
Well, and
And
that's really what I've found is that I mean, when you talk to regular people, they don't put it in silos like that. The
no,
musicians especially don't because they hate being categorized. They hate just having to stay in, especially if they're true artists. They hate having to stay in one cage. You
absolutely,
know what I
yeah.
mean? But your average listener doesn't hear a song and go, "Oh my God, that's a country song, or that's a pop song, or that's a," they don't think of it that way.
No, they don't. And that's one of the great things that, well, back when radio had research budgets, that's one of the things you'd find out is that, yeah. I mean, there was in research studies, what was always interesting is, like, I'm talking back in the day, you were a hot AC station, and just for the hell of it, you'd throw, Stairway to Heaven in, and you'd see how huge it would test. But, common sense for you then would be, well, you're not going to play Led Zeppelin on the station that plays Whitney Houston.
Yeah.
But yeah, that has changed. And what has changed it a lot is just, the streaming platforms. And I mean, where it's a different time, right? It was really interesting. Like, when you get those experiences when they're branded in your mind, and they're like, what do I call them? Can I swear on the I
Sure.
call them a holy shit moment, right? And I'll never forget when my son Lucas, he was like 8 years old, and I come downstairs and he's playing Tony Hawk skateboard video or skateboard game, and he's singing along to never heard the song before. Well, I guess he'd obviously heard it through the video game, but he was playing a number of the Beast. He's singing a number of the Beast by Iron Maiden, which was followed by Burning Ring of Fire, and I'm just watching him in amazement, going, "Holy smokes!" Like, these kids are. I mean, they've just been exposed to every variety of music, and they're not getting it from radio, unfortunately. I mean, they get it from video games, and they
Yeah,
get
and
it,
I,
you know.
I, I had this conversation earlier because I get a lot of pushback because I watch the streaming data just like the record labels do, and I
Hmm.
and I put a lot of weight into it. It's not 100% what I make the decisions on, and what I recommend to
Yeah.
clients. I don't recommend to do the same, but I think you have to be aware of it. You have to watch it, and what you notice. So I've been tracking that stuff for 4 years, and a lot of things jump out to me that for one thing. Radio seems to be the last one to know when a song's breaking and the last one to know when an artist's career is over.
Absolutely.
That's a cruel way of saying it. I should soften that. When
Well,
an artist's career is fading,
fading,
because
yeah,
which happens to freaking everybody. I mean, no,
absolutely. Yeah.
but when you watch the number, I mean, because that stuff doesn't lie, which is why the labels look at it. It can't be fudged.
Well, yeah,
Well, I say
it's
can't be. Technically, you could buy some of that stuff, but
you could, but it's granular enough that, I
it
mean,
would
it's
be
granular.
incredibly expensive to do
Yeah,
week
but it's
after week.
also it's information that granular information is information we would die for in radio, because look at how we're measured, right? We're measured by this technology that's his biggest fault, is that we're using technology to measure our success. That what we were talking before,
It's
like the diary,
outdated.
it's got to be almost
Yeah.
100 years old, and ppm is like 30 years old, right?
But you
So
have to, depending on the market you're in. I mean, it's what we've got, and you have to live by it, and you have to subscribe to it if you can afford it. But it's not a perfect system by any means.
no, but it would be not. I mean, this is Andy. Like, I love the business I'm in, and it's going through some really profound changes. And I often worry, like, when is the change going to happen in how we measure our success on radio? Like, it's not like in 2024, um, the sample sizes we use to measure, the limited granularity we have and the data we get, the delays in reporting. uh, and the lack of having, different, besides radio, the lack of having other digital platforms measured with the listening experience in radio. Those are all things that we need to see, but I don't see any movement. I don't know. Like I don't see any progress in changing that. And
Yeah, and
that
I'm afraid we're going to miss our window too, because what I always said in the past was what will make radio change that is when advertisers start demanding that. I'm a little nervous we're going to miss that window, that they're going to demand that, and we're not going to be ready to provide that information. Because yeah, just the idea of guesstimating millions of people's listening habits based on, what 800 ppms or 80 ppms in certain certain areas, or
I know.
you know.
Especially when you're when you're being sold, or when digital media is being sold against you, and you have all this again, you can measure eyeballs, although there is all sorts of data that can be manipulated. But bottom line is that the bigger the data pool, I know the more that can be manipulated, but at the same time you have to have a lot of manipulation to be able to you know cause some sleight of hand. So I don't know. I just wish that there would be a. It always seems like it's somebody else's problem. It's not the current. I often. Do you ever wonder? Like we have. Like every person in the world has a cell phone. Like why can cell phones not be used as a measuring device of some kind? Like
I've seen some technology with the in-dash stuff that looked like, the second I saw it, I thought, okay, this is where they're going with it. They're going to more accurately measure exactly when and where people are listening and how long. And so at least, I mean, and I know not every car, it wouldn't work in every car, but at least it would work in a lot, like you said, a lot larger sample base. That's the challenge. I've talked to PDs every week that are super nervous because somebody went on vacation and their book, a diehard listener went on vacation and it threw their book off, and it's just insane.
I know. And again, you and I have seen many great careers get halted in their tracks over the years, maybe because of the reporting.
Yeah.
Maybe because of the debt. But yeah, I mean, I guess on the other side of the coin, that's the life we live, right? I mean, it's.
But there are ways, like what I always tell people is insulate yourself against that, the ups and downs. Don't over celebrate a good book or a bad, or cry too bad over a bad book. It's trends that you need to worry about. But secondly, insulate yourself with some of the other things, the streaming stat. I mean, to get your streaming numbers up, get your social stats up, get your website stats up. So that way, when you have a bad book, you can go, well, we still get 200,000 people coming to our, you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
A month, and that helps.
Yeah. No, absolutely. It's something that that I think is I don't know. Like I always thought that the internet should have been what the VCR it should have been what the VCR was to television. The internet should have been that to radio. And I don't know, somehow it kind of, I mean, there was a time there when you had there was a move. Don't even have a radio station website. Just use your Facebook page.
Right.
And it's kind of a poor man's way of, I guess,
but at the time, it cost a lot more money to create a decent website than it does
did.
today.
did.
I think that's the thing. Some people I think sometimes they got a quote early on, and they think it's still $15,000 to build a website. You know what I mean? And it's like, I think that's where because I still run into people that are like, why do I need a station website?
Yeah, I know. It's I do too, and that's the first thing I tell them is that, listen, man, if you don't embrace the digital platforms that are available to you, you are not going to win.
Yeah.
And it's like going into battle with both arms tied behind your back and your legs together, right?
Plus, it's a great opportunity for radio to grab local digital dollars too.
Yeah,
When they use that
absolutely.
megaphone of their terrestrial station to drive that other stuff, I mean, you're missing out on a great opportunity. Back on formats. Do you feel like stations are kind of playing it too safe with formats right now overall?
Hmm, do I think? Well, as far as choice of music goes, it's just the way it's worked. I mean, um, programming decisions used to be made a lot more locally.
Right.
Of course, now that's, depends which group you work for, but obviously the smaller groups, they have more flexibility, but they even tend to, download the what's being played on BDS and call the reports up and do it that way. Um, but I do think that there is, we do play it safe. I find that in some of the smaller markets or medium-sized markets, there's a little more, ingenuity happening for formats.
Right.
Actually, one of the problems I think that we're running into is, we still chase to our detriment. We still chase 2554, right? And
Yeah.
there is so much outside. Like I look at the wow factor in Phoenix. And I mean, John Sebastian, he's just done an amazing job with that station, and the numbers on that are just incredible consistently. But
Well, Tracy Johnson and I built. It's not an oldie station.
uh,
We call it. The whole point is to not make you feel old listening to it. But the era of the music we play is older, and that was the fear when we first put it on. That was the exact pushback. Is this is outside of that
yeah,
2554 demo, but it's crushed because it's an underserved market that has a ton of money, that they're willing to
absolutely.
spend, and it gets you into a lot of good advertising categories.
Oh yeah, it just blows me away. We got this they call the silver tsunami coming our way, right?
Right.
And I mean, with guys my age or even younger retiring, I mean, there is a huge chunk of the population um, that is retired or retiring that have gobs of money, and I don't know why we are not chasing them. The other thing too, I know that every generation, like if you're 60, you like to say that today's 60-year-old is kind of yesterday's 40-year-old.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
There is something to that in a way that like
Well,
none of
because
us like.
we're also living longer,
We're living longer. I look at my favorite band. I'm
and
going
we're
to see,
living well longer.
and we're
Yeah,
living well longer. I look at my wife and I are. I mean, we follow the Rolling Stones around. Okay, we're
yeah,
going to see them again this year. Mick and Keith just turned 80, right?
yeah.
My point, all that is that I don't know. There's just it's a different time, and we tend to. We also, I think, and you and I have talked about this before. We live in the long tail as well, so I don't know. There's not as much of a collective experience happening. So as we age, we find like-minded people that are in our circle that like the music that we do, like the sports that we do, and if they tend to be people that are still moving forward and still creating and still, we tend to hang around those people, and that's what our worldview is. Does it make sense?
Yes, yeah.
And I think that happens more than what we like to than we think. And I'm thinking that radio has an opportunity to reflect that because face it, um, uh, baby boomers and Generation Xers, uh, they're the guys that use radio the most,
Right.
and it's been a part of our life since we were born. And why not follow us, right?
Yeah, you're not. It's not an uphill battle to educate them
Yeah, yeah.
on what and how to listen. I do on the other end of that spectrum, below the 25-54. I do think it's important that radio doesn't just give up on the younger generation and doesn't try to fight that battle. I mean, we can't all be, uh, you know, we can't all be recurrent and goal based stations. we need to fight for that younger audience as well. But you got to be smart about how you do it and be on all the platforms they are, like we talked about earlier.
Absolutely. Yeah, you have to engage on the platforms that they're engaged with. And radio can be one of them, right?
Yeah. Yeah,
So,
but you got to play what they're listening to, and you also have you got to hire some young people. That
yeah.
helps a lot.
Hmm.
I used to always, you age out of every demo you program eventually.
Absolutely.
If you keep doing this long enough, and that's the thing. As I would age out of a demo, I would talk to promo kids that were right in the heart of it.
Yeah.
And because once you're no longer living that life yourself, you gotta bring some of those young opinions in.
Well, the saddest day of my life was, when I aged out of the 2554 demo. That was when old age started for me.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's
Well,
just
what do you,
yeah. I mean, it's different in this business
do you have
as
any
we as
thoughts
we tend to we try and remain plugged in.
on the future of our industry this year, next year, and how maybe AI could impact that positively, negatively?
Well, my own experience with AI is that I think it helps you to multitask and do many things.
Yes.
There's a huge buzz. Everything is AI these days. I think that some people see it as a threat, and it is, I guess, in some ways, a threat to the jobs they do. Listen, every new piece of technology disrupts how we do things, right?
Sure.
AI is going to be no different, but there is a way to use it to your benefit. And I think that is the challenge. I think what radio has to do is, or this industry, what we can do is how can it help us be better, not what can it replace from a talent or on-air side. It has to be a plus game, not a minus game. I know for me, AI has helped speed up so many things. I mean, for me, AI includes everything from better algorithms in the music scheduling software that you use, from being able to I look at Alexa is my personal secretary, right? If I'm building a database and I want to know chart positions of stuff, who I can ask her, right?
Yeah.
And it's also given me great ideas for topics I might want to dive into. Um, I have actually used AI in certain cases to find a certain kind of sound I'm looking for, or a character that I'm looking for. That it's been very, very helpful to me in that way. But I think that I'm excited about the future. It's a scary future, but I think that's the only way to be, right? I mean, you either live by the sword or die by the sword. Well, is that a good metaphor? I don't
No,
want
it
to die by
is.
the sword,
It
but
is a good metaphor because I mean, what I always tell people is, and I wrote a blog today that ruffled some feathers, but it'll be dated by the time this comes out. But yeah, I said, make AI your coworker instead of your replacement. So that was
absolutely,
it's exact
absolutely,
right in line with what you just said.
yeah,
Is that embrace the technology, let it make you more efficient. When I'm done with this podcast, I'm going to use AI to create 10 clips for social media out of it. Now, will I have to move things around a hair to make it perfect to catch just
yeah.
the right Howard genius there? Of course, but it makes me it would have taken me 6-7 times as long to do that one task without using AI. So why wouldn't I use it?
I know, and that's you and I both musicians.
Yeah.
I'm finding that in between in between my radio work, my sons and I, we like to. I have a recording studio here that I operate out of, and we have things set up so that when the moment of inspiration hits you, you can just jump behind the kit or plug your guitar in or whatever. And I used to. I mean, I come from the analog world, and nowadays, if I want to come up with a great mix of something, AI is my friend,
Yeah.
right? I mean, man, there's even plugins right now that you can actually let AI help you with your mix. And there's always arguments to that, right? But yeah, that's not art. That's ripping off art. But I don't think that. I think that there's so many things to do if we have technology created that can help us create better and create more of it. I'm all for it.
Yeah, I think that's exact right approach. And I know I'm keeping you long, but one quick question about being a musician, because I know I personally struggle with this. The Because we're always telling programmers to listen like a listener, and as a musician, I listen to music a little differently than other people because I'm hearing things they probably don't, and I'm sure you do the same thing. Was it hard for you to not listen like a musician when you're evaluating songs to go on the radio?
Um, yes, because what happened is that there is a certain, there's the certain side of the musician that is like, I
This
don't know.
stinks, or
Exactly, yeah, yeah. Like that middle age stinks,
yeah, yeah,
or what were they thinking of? Like there's no there's no interesting progression. Anyway, I do notice though that today's pop music has changed a lot in that, right? I mean, you got I
yeah,
remember my boys, like they play in, like two different bands each. And they're saying, "Hey, Dad, check out this stuff we wrote." And I listened to it. It's like a minute 50, right, or a minute
yeah.
30.
Oh, hip hop. I added a hip hop song to a station the other day, though. I think it was a minute 10.
I know. And so that takes me a while to get used to. I'm still old school. That's why, getting back to the Rolling Stones, Hackney Diamonds came out, and I was so thrilled to actually listen to a song that was over 340,
Yeah,
right? But yeah, I listen. I love music. If it moves me, it's good. I don't care what genre it is, right?
yeah,
But I do think that if you're writing for the algorithms, if you're writing for Spotify, if you want to make sure, I'm just finding that there's
writing for
songs that,
TikTok.
yeah. I mean, there's that kind of sucks. I mean,
Yeah,
there's songs. That's just me, though. There's a certain kind of song that moves me. Whether it's the bridge, whether it's the chorus, whether it's a cool intro. Yeah, intros you don't hear much anymore. It's
yeah.
cut to the chase. So, does that answer your question? I don't know if I
Yeah, no,
answered it.
it
Yeah.
does. I just personally that was a challenge for me, and it's still something I have to fight the urge to let that. So that's why I look so much at data, and I weigh in a lot
Yeah.
of other folks' opinions because I have a tendency to listen differently. You
Well,
know,
but it's good to listen as a fan of music, right?
sure.
And I think if you're a musician, you are a fan of music because there's an extra thing that moves you. And yeah, I also think too that it might give you an edge as far as giving you a reason to add to play something because I don't know. Music is a mystery to me. You'll hear from different artists. So I remember Tom Petty saying that. Yeah, it's just almost like these songs they just kind of float around, and I grab them, I channel them. I don't know. There's some mystery to music, and why a song is a hit someplace and a stiff another place. Um, uh, I don't know, but yeah, it's
Geographical, regional differences. I mean,
yeah.
there's I
Although,
know here in Texas, there's certainly
oh
things that
yeah,
work here that don't work elsewhere.
yeah. Well, actually, that's funny too because I'm up here in Canada and I love the Texas music scene. I mean,
Yeah,
I it's just probably because it's something different. It's something refreshing. And as far as my, being, I'm a fan of old school country, and there is a obvious thread of that runs through,
sure.
through the Texas Red Dirt stuff. So yeah.
Well, I kept you way too long, but man, you gave me some good stuff. Anything else you want to add?
No, I just yeah, I've enjoyed talking to you. This has been fun, Andy. We should have more of these conversations just casually.
I know.
Right?
We do every time we run into each other, but we don't run
Yeah.
into each other nearly enough. The tell them where they can find everything.
KruegerMedia.com basically is my website. And yeah, that's where everything. We're going through a bit of a transition right now. Also working on a new format, which should be hopefully airing its or coming to fruition in the next 2 weeks or so.
Nice.
I'll give you a tip when that one comes out.
Okay.
Yeah, so KroegerMedia.com. And honestly, I love talking radio. I love talking business. People can reach me at howardk@KroegerMedia.com.
Well, thank you, sir.
Hey, thanks, Andy. Good talking to you, buddy.
Good talk.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Radio Influencers is a radio update production. New episodes are released on Tuesday